Consider these two statements. Abortion is morally wrong and must be considered murder because life begins at conception. Now consider this alternate statement. Abortion can't be morally wrong because life is yet to begin, and it's up to the human responsible to determine whether or not they want to keep it. These two statements form the basis of our argument between life and choice, between whether or not something is right or wrong. Now, every single human being has some aspect of a sense of higher power that we hold to be morally correct or not. For me, that lies in the Bible, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yet, I've been asking myself this question. If I was questioned whether or not abortion is outlawed in the Bible, would I be able to stand on my ground and defend it? Do I know the facts behind it? So today I'm going to show you that most of what has been sold to us might actually be a fallacy. So I'm going to talk about abortion in the Bible and how that relates to my faith and how it relates to policy moving forward. In the 1860s, the Medical Association came up with a finding that they wrote up in an article, and they determined that life begins at conception. This was later picked up by the Catholic Church, and they pushed the narrative even further, as detailed in Ambiguity versus Certainty, the Moral Debate, Castrier's paper, by saying life actually begins at fertilization. So it wasn't until the 1860s that the Catholic Church picked it up. And the Catholic Church has been behind the movement for the longest time. As Luckett points out in her paper, she's a Catholic who's also an obstetrician, and she now understands that living in those standards, not being able to prescribe what could potentially be life-saving, is impossible. After the Catholic Church provided this information or these findings, then the movement behind the abortion started. In the article, When Does Life Begin?, Biggers talks about how science cannot truly try to analyze this question because, honestly, nobody knows. Is it when the heartbeat starts? Is it when ensoulment happens, which is when human consciousness can start to be detected within the fetus? Obviously, you would expect to find such a fundamental issue ingrained in one of the documents that people claim so highly to reference it, the Bible. So now that we know a little bit about history, let's see how it all makes sense religiously. Most people who you argue with from the basis of the Bible would say there's two passages that mainly highlight this to be wrong. The first one is in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 15. Thou shalt not commit murder. The second passage is right after that in Exodus 21, which talks about two men fighting and injuring a pregnant woman, subsequently leading to miscarriage or death. Now, most Bible scholars see the second passage, Exodus 21, to be referring to life of the mother as being sacred, not necessarily the fetus. Yet most Christians will twist that and say, hey, no, God is talking about the fetus, therefore abortion is wrong. And if going back to the first one, thou shalt not commit murder, brings us back to the original question. When does life truly begin? According to St. Augustine of Hippo, this wasn't a big issue. It wasn't really an enormous task for the church to undertake. And St. Augustine of Hippo is the person most cited in writings, in Catholic writings, up to this day. Now he cites if the Apostle Paul in the Bible, who was living in a torrid time in Rome, did not consider this issue to be that great, then why should we? It's obviously a moral issue. He doesn't advocate for it, but he doesn't say that it's illegal, wrong, because, quite frankly, it wasn't that big of a problem. But enough about medieval times. What does this mean for you right now? How can this prophecy affect your policy? Well, Razanin reports in his paper that when people hold on to the substance view, which is life begins at fertilization or conception, it poses a huge problem when it comes to conservation. Think of it this way. Imagine you're with your child at a laboratory where they fertilize eggs. They're already fertilized, let's say 3,000 eggs. And all they're waiting for is to be collected by their hosts in order to go and grow into babies. Your child starts playing and runs around, and in the commotion, a fire breaks out. Now, is it morally correct to save your one child, abandoning the 3,000 fertilized eggs, or saving the 3,000 fertilized eggs and abandoning your child? It's this kind of question that is asked when you say that life begins at fertilization, because surely saving 3,000 is morally correct or more morally accepted than saving one. Giving the life of one for the life of 3,000 should be a no-brainer, yet I know myself, I would never be able to live with that decision, and I would always save my child. This goes to show that perhaps we form bonds and associations differently from what we would like to actually advocate for. Now consider this. McCulloch, in her paper, The Right of the Unborn, talks about what would happen in an instance of immigration where somebody, an illegal immigrant, for all intents and purposes, conceives while on American soil. Can we then deport her because she is carrying an American citizen if life begins at fertilization, right? It becomes almost impossible to implement laws that fight against immigration if we focus on the wrong issues. Now, I started off talking about the history of abortion and how it truly became an issue, and then tried to debunk some of the misconceptions and myths that are surrounded by the Christian faith, and how that prophecy has affected our policy to date, and how it will continue to affect the policy moving forward, and why it should worry us. We must make objective analyses whenever we face such decisions, because the discussion is far much greater than just left or right, black or white, choice or life. It's more fundamental than that. Surely there must be a gray in which we come together and decide that this is the way forward. I conclude by saying this. I am a Christian, and I am a pro-life Christian. But now I understand that there is no life without choice, and I invite you to join me in this undertaking.